Welcome back to the MB Dog Training Podcast, guys. So we've got Simon, aka the Mutt Nut, with us today, which is one of the better names of dog trainers that I've come across, and it doesn't include canine for once, like everyone else. So we've got a bunch of stuff to talk about. So first off, tell us about you. What do you do, and why should people listen to you?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on, mate. It's really nice to be here. Very professional setup, but always nice to be asked. So, like I say, my name's Simon, dog trainer. Worked with dogs for getting on for about 12 years now in a variety of different environments. Worked heavily in rescue, as we just touched on off camera then. Heavily in rescue for several years. Worked with service dogs a little bit as well, with guide dogs. Previously used to live in Norway as well, so used to dog sled over there. Go back quite a lot of years now. Oh, and then worked for myself for the last 6 years as well. So my main, probably very similar to you actually, is reactivity. Yeah. Whether it's just because we're good at it or whether it's just because there's that many dogs. Yeah. I like to think about both.
I do often wonder that. Is it because I'm good at this, or is it just because that's the main thing? I can never tell.
Yeah, so it's one of them. For me personally, I work with everyday dog owners. In the sense that working with people who have lives and jobs and kids and things to deal with, and they have a dog, maybe it might not be the most appropriate thing that they've done, but equally we're just effectively picking up the pieces and how can we make their life and the dog's life better every day. Cool. Reactivity is typically reactivity, aggression, basically where the dog's world is very, very small, and equally the dog owner's world is very small, and just trying to give them with very, very basic but simple and effective ways in order to obviously combat that, manage it, and obviously create new behaviour as well.
Cool. Talk to me about dog sledding in Norway, because that sounds so cool. I didn't know you did that.
Yeah, no, it was a good while ago now. Effectively, what it was like a very, very bespoke adventure holiday group, basically. No, so there was only like 3-4 of us, like 2 international mountain leaders and then me, of which at the time had very little, I'll be honest, I had very little dog training experience. Yeah. I'd been like working in sanctuaries and rescues, volunteering. I hadn't had a paid job at that point then, and it just came up, and he said, would you like to come and work out in Norway? So I was like, yeah, sounds. So we did a lot of training before that. So a lot of training on carts, basically. Yeah. In the UK, which always looks bizarre. It was weird, but
just picturing you in a Tesco trolley. Mush.
Yeah, pretty much. But working with Greenland dogs, and then cut a long story short, obviously did a lot of training in terms of how to sled, which was interesting. And then obviously went over to Norway, had to learn how to ski. But basically the general day-to-day would be that people would come on very much like a ski holiday, but it was like in the middle of nowhere. So literally like there wouldn't be like a town for maybe like a town as in like Bury Oldham for maybe like 100 miles. Like it was crazy. But effectively we went out and did trips and wild camps, and sometimes you might be 100 miles from the nearest road. It was crazy. So that was great. That was really, really fun. Love that. And then, so it was a long time ago now. I would have loved to go back and do it. Yeah. It's just not something that comes up very, very easily or very...
Yeah, no, of course. It's not exactly a normal kind of thing, is it?
No, not quite, but it was great.
So, right, I didn't know that. That was really... Because obviously I read a bit on your website and that kind of thing, and saw the working in rescues and the guide dog thing and that kind of stuff. So I kind of knew that, but I didn't realise the...
Yeah, it's not something I talk about a lot, but it was amazing.
That sounds like... I don't think I'd ever shut up about it if I was doing that. Cool. So, obviously, we're both dog trainers. We're both in similar fields in terms of, like you said, everyday dogs, owners that maybe don't really know what they're doing, and maybe got a dog that wasn't the right breed for them, or was the right breed, but it's got issues that they've never come across before. At the minute, for me, the industry is just... the most toxic place, especially online. Like it's disgusting to some of the stuff you come across, some of the stuff you read. Obviously, it doesn't help us do our job, and often it can make our job harder because you're trying to do your job and post meaningful content, but then also you've got someone that's read a book or watched a couple of YouTube channels just laying into you, or other trainers, which I sometimes think is worse, that are sort of laying into each other. And if you ever go on the comments of any video, you only have to scroll 2 or 3 to find someone just spitting some venom. So what are your thoughts on the industry at the minute? Obviously, this is aside from dog training, but I think it's really important.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think there's... in a nutshell, I think it is a very tricky place. It's a very tricky place for trainers. Definitely a very tricky place for owners, because it's who the hell do you pick?
Yeah.
because everyone's got an opinion, and quite rightly, but equally it can be very conflicting, very contradictory, very toxic, as you say. For trainers, I feel like it is very difficult. Because, as you say, it's just the whole thing is just a bit of a mess, in my opinion. And don't get me wrong, there's still some fantastic dog trainers out there, but I think, like you say, the key thing being social media there, where it's just like you've got everybody chirping in. There seems to be an enormous amount of people that just like to give people shit, which I find. I genuinely have never left. I hand on heart, I've never left like a horrible comment on anything ever. I don't know how people. I find it bizarre. Don't get me wrong. Nothing wrong with offering opinion, asking questions. You know, we're not all going to get on, but I just think it's a very, very difficult place at the minute. Yeah. I honestly feel more sorry for the dog owners sometimes, because it's like, who do we listen to? Yeah. And it just makes it so difficult.
I think the worst bit for me, the bit that kind of makes it hurt the most, is we're all trying to achieve the same thing. We're all doing this to make dogs' lives better and people's lives better. But there tends to be a lot of people that I sometimes wonder, is that really what you're trying to achieve, or are you just trying to be right? And regardless of whether you actually know that what you're saying is correct, or whether it's just belief. So obviously for some people watching, they won't really know too much about this. The average person, the average dog owner hasn't got the foggiest that this kind of politics is going on. And I try to stay out of it as much as possible, but sometimes it's really difficult to kind of bite your tongue. So something you've spoke to me about is, so you were... without going too far into the labels and the cringiness of it, but you were kind of in that force-free community where everything should be based around rewarding positive behaviours while either ignoring or trying to prevent rehearsal of negative behaviours without ever challenging those behaviours, or trying to make the dog think, right, well, I don't want to do that anymore because the consequence of it for me is negative. So you've kind of drifted away from that more extreme arm of it towards sort of closer towards the middle, I guess.
I guess I'll be honest, everything you said there, I still do every single day. And I know you would do as well.
Same with
and this is where it was just getting, there was just huge pieces missing, nothing was really correlating. But yeah, in a nutshell, I feel like I've stepped away from that label, but I have done for the last couple of years. Like I've not advertised as that. Yeah. I've not, and that's not because I hate everyone in that community who does prescribe to it. It's not that at all. Like there's some, I know because I've worked with them, some fantastic trainers, and that's not me slagging anybody off. For me, it's just that I personally now like to sit in the middle of the middle, so to speak, in that, you know, you're quite right. The majority of what you should be doing as a dog trainer, in my opinion, a lot of the time, depending on what you're working with, obviously, is that relationship. Obviously, we'll get into this, I'm sure. Relationship, creating behaviours you want. But then also there's the element of, you know, having outcomes to certain things in order to, in a very healthy way, suppress certain behaviours so that the dog doesn't want to run out in the road, so that the dog doesn't want to get attacked by another dog. There is that healthy, and it's the same with us, I think. It's there's a certain healthy ability where the behaviours are suppressed so that we don't get behaviours that can be potentially dangerous, life-threatening, and so on and so forth. So for me, though, when you stop and think about it, it is very common sense in the sense that for me, if I understand when I'm working with reactivity, which we'll get into, if I know the dog's got a skill set, if I know that the dog has had the criteria built up, the dog's got a good lifestyle, that gives me the green light really to then be like, right, let's start pushing the dog. Let's start putting the dog in situations where it is going to be more difficult. Let's see how they handle it. And it's not that we chuck the dog into the deep end, but it's, let's push the dog. Let's challenge the dog. Because ultimately we want to make the dog's world bigger. So in answer to your question, nothing has drastically changed per se. Obviously things have developed over the years, and the way that I handle a dog will be different to 5 years ago, and same with you, I'm sure, but in the sense that we all develop and we develop our skill. But definitely come away from prescribing to anything in regards to that community. It's just I just think there's so much confliction in there, and for me personally, when you think about it, it's very, I don't think you can have something that is completely force free, because everything, the dog might want to sit on the couch, the dog might want to sit there, not there. Like,
do you just let go of the lead when it wants to run out? Just because it's got a harness doesn't mean that you're not like.
And then we get into the argument of like the whole lemur thing. And then I think, well, for me personally, I think it's up to the dog what they find aversive, not what we go, oh, the dog won't like. Do you know what I mean? So
I say this a lot about, so there's a lot of dogs I work with, and like the owners have tried like correcting them like massively, and like with the physical correction, the dog's like,
Yeah.
And I think I always find that'd be similar with Albus, my border collie. He's hard. He's like he's a border collie. He's built to get his head kicked in by sheep.
Exactly.
And all the rest of it. So like if you were to correct him on a slip lead, he'd be like, oh, right, sorry. But if I spoke to him in a stern voice, it'd ruin his day.
Yeah.
He's like, oh no. You could that'd be more aversive to him, me just saying Albus no, than me yanking his head off with a slip lead. He'd be much more bothered about avoiding the verbal. And for other dogs, it might be the removal of reward would be massively aversive to them. So
exactly,
at the end of the day, what's more aversive, in the same way that would I rather have a punch in the face or someone take £1,000 out of my bank? Probably rather someone chin me, to be honest, than lose £1,000. Like, what would be more aversive? Just because one's physical doesn't mean that it's not worse for me. I use the example with my son all the time. So he's 13, he's addicted to his Xbox. Now, not that I would ever slap him, but if I offered him the choice of a punishment between slapping him in the face or taking his Xbox, he'd ask me which cheek first. He'd be, go on, do you want, he'd be much more affected by the removal of that reward. So I think sometimes that's just something that gets conveniently brushed over in the conversation.
100%. And I think you'll find people, and again, I'm not trying to slag anybody off here, and everybody, for me, is welcome to attend classes, events, seminars, follow on the page. Like, I'm welcome, anyone, whatever you do, because I think that's what the community needs more than ever now. Is conversations. Okay, you do this, I don't actually agree with that, but tell me about it and I'll tell you what I just like trying to just bring people together, because there'll be some dogs, same as you, I wouldn't dream of like putting too much pressure on the dog, because they will literally break. But obviously there'd be some dogs where, okay, now I want to push them, I want to get them in front of more dogs, I want to get them in town centres, I want to be able to, or cars, or whatever it is that they're particularly uncomfortable with. But it's just having, and I guess it's that art form of knowing when to push and knowing when to back off. If you're simply there because you want to, and obviously there's an element of skill set and doing things appropriately, of course, but if you're there because you want the best for your dog, you want the best relationship, you want the dog to be there, you want the dog to be motivated, not all the time, but 70% of the time, or whatever, that for me that makes more sense, rather than just, the dog's on a long line, dog's never going off lead, dog can't do this and that because I don't want to push the dog. Then I think personally, it depends on the dog, of course, but what I'm getting at is people focus sometimes too much on the short-term needs of the dog. When I like to think long-term needs, bigger life, bigger world, more exercise, more running, more freedom. That's what I want to focus on. And I think sometimes, not always with the force-free stuff, of course, but I think sometimes, I've seen it time and time again with clients where they get stuck in a rut and they just round and round and round, and they're like looking for an answer constantly. And the answer is sometimes you've got to push the dog. You've got to give the dog feedback. You've got to give the dog some form of consequence. Doesn't mean you kick the crap out of the dog, obviously, but you have to mean what you say. You have to give some form of consequence so that you give the dog clarity at the end of the day. I always say punishment is about giving clarity. It's not about ruining your relationship. It's about the dog understanding yes and no. I always give the example of if you're driving, when the lights are out somewhere and it's just bedlam, like it's just chaos because you've got people like coming here, coming there, you're going, you're stopping.
Such a good analogy.
And it's like fucking chaos. Sorry, I swear.
No, go for it.
It's absolute fucking bedlam, and then that creates the emotion of anxiety because it's not predictable. So you're like, shit, fuck, like, and then when the traffic lights are on, literally you could drive
knows
from
what to do,
Scotland
what to
to London. Don't get me wrong, you'll get the odd knobhead, but it will be relatively stress-free. You see people, like people talking, rightly or wrongly, people on the phones because it's easy, because it's reliable. So I always say punishment it's got an emotional attachment to the word, and people think, I can't punish. But again, as we just said there, withholding food, maybe feeding your dog later in the day, you could argue negative reinforcement, punishment. So I think it's just, if you were to watch me train a lot of the time, people would probably say, he's not changed anyway. But it's because there's so much value in everything they talk about in Force Free. But again, you can only get so far, in my opinion. And I think people get caught in a rut, and then you look at the dog's lifestyle and you think, that could be so much better.
So I think it's that word punishment and the word discipline. I think it depends how you define it. For me, punishment, just going off the kind of dictionary definition, is a consequence that reduces the likelihood of a repeat of a behaviour. But then discipline, people go, like that's like smacking your kids kind of thing. No, discipline has more than one meaning. And if I'm disciplined enough to get up in the morning, go to work, well, that's discipline. If I'm disciplined enough to work out or work on my skills or learn more, like, that's discipline too. But then if you hear the word discipline, some people are just like, nope, that's all about, it's abuse.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's kind of like everyone just jumps to that extreme of it, which I think sometimes then makes it so much worse for the owner, because they're like, well, I don't want to abuse my dog. And it's like, no one's suggesting that. But now that this person's thrown that word in the mix, or the cruelty or whatever, it's like, that's not what we're doing here. But I think it's
that's something that, again, as my content has changed over certainly the last 18 months, I'll be honest, the last probably 2 years to 18 months, creeping up more, as, don't get me wrong, some great support, but I've dealt with a lot of shit, particularly recently, like a ton of shit, like just
traitor.
Yeah. But it's just, not get me wrong, there's been some very, very brilliant feedback from other podcasts have done and certain content, and which is great. And a lot of people it's funny actually, because there's so many force-free trainers. I can think of 3 who have approached me and said, literally feel the same way that you feel. So which is good, because I just think it's getting people opening their minds, getting people having conversations with other trainers, getting other, and ultimately, like, we're both sat here because we like dogs. We want the best for dogs and their owners.
Yeah, so I had a lad shadowing me. He was a friend of my auntie's. He'd done the dog training college, all force-free kind of stuff. He'd done his qualification, and he's wanting some experience and some actually see what it's like in real life. And he's done some sessions here and there at this point, but wanted to kind of see what it looked like. So he's come to watch a session. It was I want to say it was like a golden retriever or a lab or something. It was pulling on the lead. We were just at a park. It wasn't reactive, but it pulled. And I did a pressure and release kind of session with it, with the slip lead. So I taught it that if the pressure goes on, come this way. When you come this way, I mark and I reward that behavior until it learns that this is a good thing, come towards it. And we started doing some sort of just basic stuff, getting it in the right position, letting it know where we want it, that kind of stuff. But it involved using pressure and release, minor amounts, but pressure and release. And you could see him stood there, just jaw dropped. You could see he was like, I couldn't make that happen in a million years with the skills that I've been taught. And I've been told that I've been taught enough to become a dog trainer. And just watching this, you could just see it in his face as we were going through, and the dog were changing. There was just pennies dropping all over the place, and you could see he was like, I've been had off here. I've been totally played. And something you mentioned off camera was like, they're paying a lot of money for this under the guise that they're going to be able to go out and be a dog trainer off this and go do what we do, basically. Is that ethical to take their money and tell them that this is all you need, when surely deep down the people teaching that course also know that he's not going out into the world really equipped for what he's going to come across and what he's going to see, and he's going to fail a bunch of dogs and a bunch of owners, and it's going to cost him, God knows what it cost him, but I'm assuming it wasn't cheap. So what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, no, I can understand that, in the sense that, when I look back and think, I'm going back several years now, so I did my accreditation with the IMDT, which, I'll be brutally honest, I loved it. Like, I found it very, very, I thought it was great in the sense that just the way you deliver, because it was the way how you deliver classes and doing one-to-ones, and there was a lot of theory and stuff. But obviously it was in a certain parameter. So you weren't taught anything about punishment. A lot of the time was just slag it off. Slag it off. It's shit. It don't work. It's crap. Everything's suppressed. And again, there's as we've even just been talking here, like, it doesn't mean that necessarily straight away you should jump into that anyway. It's very much, as we've already said, engagement, relationship, and so on and so forth. But it was just like, you can't talk about it.
Yeah.
Don't do it. If the trainers do it, don't associate yourself with the trainer. Like, it was just very much like, we don't talk about that.
There was dog sense training and behaviour. Have you seen those?
Are they in Australia?
I think so, yeah. They put something recently. I think it was IMDT. So they were in a conversation online somewhere, and an IMDT certified trainer basically just started giving them proper shit. Like, right, okay. You're abusing dogs, all the usual sort of stuff. So this person went into the guidelines for IMDT certified trainers, and you are not to engage in that kind of thing. You are not to berate other trainers in the industry. So he sent all their details as screenshots to IMDT, and I just thought, that's outstanding work. That, like, what a way of shutting it down. Like, even your organisation says you're not to be seen to be doing that, but then.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And I like to say, for the record, like, I only have good things to say about MDT. The guys who I trained with, I learned so much, do you know what I mean? And I still implement the stuff that I learned now. But it's more and again, I have no qualms with them at all. But it's more it would have been great to learn the other side of things going back 6 years. Do you know what I mean? And
there's nothing.
It's just, and I think it's when you come through it, it's like, it's very triggering. Do you know what I mean? Like when you're taught you only use this and you only use that, if you think about doing this, then you're a bad person. That's basically what it means. And now understanding how that works, it's very much not the case.
I think the issue for me is on the other side of things. There isn't anything as big as the dog training college, IMDT, and all the rest of it. So there isn't someone that teaches you as comprehensively to do the other side. So it's hard to be balanced, because even though clearly scientifically it's just as important, we're only ever qualified in this side and not on the flip side.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but for the majority of what you would talk about anyway, it's probably like 20% or less than, maybe 10% of we do this as well. Majority of everything you're saying, we already do that. And we love it. But this bit we do as well. And that, like you say,
I think sometimes it's that 10% can be the most important, because it's the bit that's been missing all along. They've
literally.
So the other 90, they've got 80 of it down themselves, and they just need fine tuning, work on some timing, make sure that they're like delaying markers and all the rest of it, those little simple things. But then there is a 10% chunk missing, and it is impossible to get it done without it in many, many cases. So for me, that's where it kind of comes down to, if you can teach the person the extra 20% that they're missing, 10% of the positive, 10% of the negative, then they're good to go. But they can't find that information, and no one out there is qualified or is running certified, accredited programs on that side of things. So even if you went and got the best degree in the world, you're still going to have to go and find out about real life somewhere else. And I always think there's just something horribly unethical about we're withholding that bit because it doesn't taste nice, and it doesn't look good, and it doesn't sell. And for me, that it always just makes me think it's not in the best interest of that dog. That dog would be fixed if we challenged that behavior consistently for a fortnight. And that's all this dog needs. There's some dogs where I think, God, there's so much more than that. But there's some dogs I just think it needs telling a few times consistently with a meaningful consequence, and it will figure out, actually, this just isn't worth my time. They'll make a different decision. We'll jump on that decision and tell them, that's awesome, do more. Here's your favourite thing. Here's toy, here's affection, here's food, here's whatever. And that dog's going to be like, really, that's all it needed. Oh my God, awesome. And I just say, I've always just felt like something doesn't sit right. It always makes me feel uneasy that that's such an agenda. That is it in the best interest of the dog, or is it in the best interest of people's pockets? Sometimes.
I mean, personally, from my experience, I've not previously worked with certain organisations, and we've talked about and so on and so on. I've never felt like it was a money grabbing thing, I'll be honest, but I think there's a lot of good people in there, and a lot of good people where it's they genuinely want to help, and they think that is the best approach. And sometimes with certain dogs it is, but I totally agree on the fact that, coming back to what I said before, the short-term needs is like this obsession where it's like, don't make the dog feel uncomfortable, don't make the dog feel uncomfortable. And then it's like, okay, well, we now got a dog made of glass. How the only way that we can, and again, this is where you'll see other trainers, maybe they sit under the banner of Force Free or whatever, but then I'll see them and they're exposing the dog, and they're maybe even flooding the dog slightly, which I would agree with sometimes. And I think
has its place.
But again, you're picking and choosing. Do you know what I mean? What you're doing there is probably negative reinforcement, positive punishment, and you're doing the right thing. But you would fly it under the flag of, oh yeah, we don't do any of that. And that's where I just started getting uncomfortable with it. I was like, I actually don't want to. I don't feel right about that now. Just
something feels off about that for me.
And there's nothing wrong. Again, like you say, I've worked in rescue a lot, and I've spoke about this before, where if I've got, it sounds awful, I've got a deadline, it's like, look, we need to, if we can't sort this dog out, because it's a horrible industry, if we can't sort the dog out, the dog's a danger, the dog's this, that and the other, when we need, PTS is on the cards, I flood the dog all day long. Like, I will flood the dog, I'll put that dog in the situation, I'll give the dog feedback, or like I say, you simply just don't reinforce with space as a very basic thing.
Of course.
Or whatever it is, and muzzle train within 3 days, and in order to prevent the dog from being put to sleep. So again, that to me is ethical, because the dog's now gone.
I just can't see. I always find it interesting that people will argue that point. What leg are you standing on that it's better that we keep the dog comfortable until we put it to sleep? Why don't we just, if it was me, if I'm that dog, throw me in, whatever it is, do whatever you need to do to me or put me through. If it means that, I come out the other side. And I always use this, like, all the worst things that I say the worst things have happened to me in my life. They led me to be this guy. And I like this guy. I didn't like the guy before because he was soft and he didn't appreciate, and he didn't like, so the family I've got now, the partner I've got now, I had to go through a relationship where I wasn't the best person I could be, and neither was she, and she's in a great relationship now, and so am I. And the job I was in, I didn't realize how crap it was until well, it's the same for dogs. They haven't experienced any of these things, but it also means that once something minorly inconvenient comes up, meltdown, crumble.
And it's funny because I'm a very deep person, so I always overanalyze what I'm doing, always overanalyze what I'm saying,
you need to be in this
what
industry.
I'm selling, what I'm offering to people. But just as a person, even away from dog training, like, I just resonate with what you said there, and I think it taps into dogs so much. And as you say, like, previously been in, going back many years now, but previously been in relationships where almost going in with like that sort of force-free approach where it's like, oh, I don't want to give feedback, I don't want to do
don't want to set a boundary.
Yeah, exactly. But then ultimately, long term, the relationship's on its ass. Yeah. And obviously much younger in that age and whatever. But
you got to learn.
It's great. I totally resonate with what you say because of myself, like how I've grown the last 5 years and the 5 years before that and so on. You know, and we've all been through shit, and that element of negative reinforcement is probably always there. Yeah. And learning how to switch it off, learning how to deal with things, learning how not to react.
Yeah, I think it's just so important that people understand how close the mental health side of people and dog behavioural issues actually are. They overlap so much. Reactivity, what is it but like lashing out and frustration? Anxiety, separation anxiety, what is it but abandonment and attachment? It's all so similar. It just displays differently with the different species. And I think the more people understand about their own brain and the more they learn themselves, the easier it is to look at a dog and go, I know where you're coming from. And then all we need to do is teach them how to get them from there to where they need to be. So we've got some questions. So I put my story about that we're having you on. Got some questions. First off, Joe asked, "How's your golf coming?" So for those that don't know, Joe is my golf coach, and turns out he's also coached Si.
Yeah, I think I nearly retired Joe a few times. I think when I turn up, he just goes, "Oh,
think about the money." No,
to be fair, I've not had a session with him for a while, but it has been better. It has been better. But
he's good, isn't he?
I will see you soon, Joe.
Yeah, he's very good. So Luke and a couple of other people have said very quite similar things, kind of predictable questions. How can I stop my dog from being reactive on the lead? What can I implement in his training? My dog is only reactive on the lead, lunges and barks at passing dogs. So they're slightly similar. We'll come to them differently. So Luke, how can I stop my dog from being reactive? What can I implement in his training?
Big question.
Now we talked a bit about this out of camera, so you can explain the why we're not going to give him too many answers here.
Yeah, won't give too many answers purely on the fact that don't know enough information on the dog, don't know the history of the dog, how long has the dog rehearsed the behaviour, the lifestyle of the dog, the medical status, so on and so forth. You know, that is ultimately the big questions that we would need to know. Yeah. But let's say, for example, everything's in check medically, live dog's got a mint lifestyle to the best of their ability. The key thing for me would be, let's say, for example, the dog's not really got a skill set, i.e. the dog's not really, not any sort of understanding of engagement or walking on the lead or marker system or anything like that. First thing for me would be very, very rigid management setup. So if the dog's been exposed to 3 dogs a walk, they're booting off like mad 3 times on a walk, times that by 2, that's 6 times a day, times that by 7, like we're getting big numbers, times that by 4 in a month. Got a huge amount of reinforcement history that I want to immediately remove.
Picture matrix symbols in front of me.
So straight away I'd want to remove that. Now, I always stress to people, this isn't the strategy to just avoid everything, but ultimately we ain't got a toolkit, so we can't put the dog in
rehearsal out of the picture until you've got the toolkit.
So it's like I would say, driving a car. We've just been talking about all the different analogies and stuff.
We've cut off like 3 times because there's been technical issues, so we've had some chats on camera.
But in terms of driving a car, if your first lesson was on the slip road to the motorway and you just set off, it'd be a fucking nightmare because you need to understand how everything works. You need to understand where everything is, how to achieve certain things, what does what, before you bring in other variables, adrenaline, hormones, and like I say, effectively, like
it's
the
so
environment.
Complex.
So it's like you wouldn't start there. You start sat down, this does this does that, this does this, well done, blah, blah, blah. Same with dogs. So management system needs to be absolutely bang on, certainly for the first few weeks, if not, like I say, a couple of months, depends on the intensity of it. Mark system, absolutely everything. So for those who are not sure what a mark system is, it's effectively verbal feedback to the dog. So the classic one would be a terminal marker or a clicker or something like that, where the dog understands that now food is going to be presented. Because again, if you're introducing it, you can be sort of sat here with a brew and you could literally do it very, very boring, but obviously pairing it up with things so the dog understands.
Good dog training's always boring.
Yeah, that's what I'm being reinforced for, because I sat my ass down or I looked at you or whatever. So general introducing a marker, whether it's a clicker or not. But also other things, getting into other bigger questions, but release cue as well, the dog understanding what that means. I really, really like to make sure that I can have the dog, even in an easy environment, making sure that the dog can walk in a relatively close position and take that reinforcement, but also understand that a release cue is, okay, now you've got the full length of the lead, and we just rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, so that the dog is switched on, the dog is switched off, the dog is switched on, the dog is switched. Because ultimately,
I talk about that so often. I love that.
If the dog can't do that, how the fucking hell is the dog going to be able to cope with another dog? And it's just, again, you're setting the dog up to fail. So focusing on the short-term needs of the dog, we've talked about that, but I would definitely focus on that to begin with. Marker system, hand feeding, if you really can. Some people struggle with that massively.
Raw food.
If you can, preferably I would, just so that it just makes the value of the food through the roof. But marker system is very important. Like I say, lead pressure, introducing lead pressure. And again, the way that would do that, bit of a Napo pole system, so to speak, where it would be introduce the pressure. As soon as the dog shows any commitment to that lead, turn it off, back, and reinforce, and you build the criteria. So the dog can move like a crab, left, right, backwards, forwards. And I always say, if people struggle with that, just have the dog coming towards you first. It's the easiest way. But basically, the whole idea is we need to develop some form of skill set, and that is very, very basic. Then you can bring in distractions, or the people that you live with, practicing garden to begin with, marking and reinforcing for looking at something. Anyway, so on and so forth. That is where I would start initially. Then typically, once you've got a decent skill set, you want to then obviously work out the dog's threshold. We don't want to stay there forever, definitely not, but work out where the dog is effectively working and then just completely just losing its shit. Working out roughly where that is, using setup dogs, preferably reliable people, friends, family. That can be difficult for people sometimes.
It's a big challenge.
But if you have got it, then you need to abuse it, because you need to, and then ultimately from there it's creating a reliable, predictable environment for the dog where you're going to at some point have to put the dog over threshold in order for them to understand. The way I put it is, and again, for me, the green light to do this is everything I said before. Lifestyle of the dog needs to be bang on. The dog's management system needs to be there. The dog needs to have outlets to feel good, sleep, blah, 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 so on and so forth. But once the dog understands the criteria, then that's okay. Right, we're going to push the dog a little bit further. They might get a kick off, but then the dog needs to understand everything we've talked about already is, okay, my behaviour now isn't having an impact on what's in front of me, but it ain't getting any worse. So then it allows the dog just to establish a predictable pattern of, fuck, like this is happening, and then we work through it for maybe 5 minutes. Maybe sometimes it can be so quick when the dog's like, yeah, all right,
that's not working for me no more.
It's not working, but it's not getting worse, and boom, reinforcements happening, and we just build that over time. I just think sometimes people stay at threshold for too long.
100%.
In a nutshell, that's what I do. Practice more, get more dogs, and keep it in a controlled environment as best as you can.
Love it. Or, and this is a wild take, get a dog trainer.
I'll do that.
Sometimes, like all that stuff you just come out with, obviously it makes sense to me and it'll make sense to a lot of people, but then for some people they're just going to look at you and go, was that in Swedish? Like, what have you just like?
It could be all bollocks anyway. That might be the wrong thing to do.
But again, which is why when people say any tips on, no, I'm out. Like, no, because I could make your dog worse.
Exactly. Yeah, that is one
if
thing
I
I'm
give
very
you,
careful on.
Well, yeah, just correct the dog. That could be the worst possible thing.
Exactly.
Or try and reward the dog when it could be the worst thing.
Yeah.
We don't know the outcomes.
Exactly.
So Linda has said, why is my dog reactive in the house and garden, but once out of her space, she's a completely different dog? Now, this is a German Shepherd.
Okay.
White German Shepherd. So there's an element of the answers in the name. But what would you... So once out on walks, reactivity is just not particularly present. People coming to the garden or home, kick off.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'd have a lot of questions to ask, but it would be, what's the dog's general... I'm going to assume that the dog's happy with people then. would you say?
Lovely dog.
Lovely dog, happy with people. Just
So Grace, who used to work for me, did some training on the walking side of things, and I've met them. We were doing some recall stuff quite a while ago when she was a bit of a pup, but lovely dog.
Yeah, so I mean, it would be obviously the biggest thing there is obviously genetic disposition to want to guard. Again, same thing. How long was the dog rehearsed it? What are they currently doing? Is there any management there?
The thing, I mean, so knowing the dog, and the thing that I'm going to kind of suggest, but again, only because I know the dog, I wouldn't. But I'd suggest long line in the garden, and then if the behaviour is beginning or if something comes along, you're out that garden. Prevent that. Like, it's kind of a management system and a correction all at once. In that you don't get to see that person leave, so you don't get that postman syndrome reward of go on, I've backed you away. But also, oh no, I'm inside now. Like, I think that'd work really well in this situation, and it's kind of one of those where you can't really make things worse by doing it that way. Like, it'd be hard to really create a problem if that's the it might not work, but that'd be the kind of approach I'd want to start with, because it's so simple and it requires very little.
Majority of the time in that situation, the dog is more than likely desperate to meet the person. If the dog's sound and likes people anyway, the dog is probably, we talked about this a minute ago, is it aggression, is it not? I mean, chances are, depends on the scenario, obviously, don't take this with a pinch of salt, but that could be far more punitive to remove the dog anyway than offering a correction.
Taking the Xbox off me 13.
Exactly, because the dog's
do you want to be in the garden? Cool, you're losing it.
The dog actually is keen to say hello because they quite clearly like people, but they've got that disposition of, I'm a German Shepherd, and if it's been rehearsed constantly, like you say, postman syndrome, and they're just like, I don't really know why I'm doing this, but I'm doing it.
Feels good.
Exactly, yeah. So I think something like that, negative punishment, or you could maybe say positive punishment because it's happening, whatever. But
I always is it positive punishment because I'm doing something to you that you dislike, but I'm taking something away that you like. It's kind of flirting with the boundaries of the operant conditioning kind of side of things. But I've found it works so well in so many cases. Just get the dog out of the garden quick, ASAP. Long line on, you're in. The amount, and then for me also, just write down how many times did you have to do it for a week. And if that number is coming down, stick with it. If it's not, fine, but we need to dive in a bit deeper. But yeah, that's like I say, a lot of it is coming down to that's a GSD. Like, it's just it's just bread and butter for that dog, isn't it? So Holly has said, and this is one, you'll hear this a lot, and I hear it a lot too. My dog is only reactive on the lead. Lunges and barks at passing dogs. He's a cockapoo with a loud voice. So I'm filling in some blanks here, but I'm gonna guess that means that it spends a fair bit of time off the lead. But if she knows that it's only reactive,
or something like that.
Either that, or they just get to the field and get straight to. So Robin's just texted me that last question to make sure I get it. Get straight to sort of. We're to the field. The dog probably pulls to get there. If I had to guess, this is we're going to fill a lot of blanks in here, but it's because we've heard it before. Pulls to the park or the field or wherever, gets off lead, plays with the ball, does whatever, goes and plays with the dogs.
Huge jackpot, basically.
Yeah, gets all the stuff it wants and has no frustration placed upon it, and then it's bang on the lead, doesn't know how to be on the lead very well, and frustration just spins up through the roof almost instantly. 100%. So the difficulty for the thing for me is you've got to take away that off lead time, because that's where the dog is being not spoiled in that you're like spoiling it rotten, but it's being given way too much of something that it's not prepared and equipped for just yet. And it hasn't, I'm assuming, hasn't learned the skills on lead required to remove frustration. So we talked about like the pressure and release of a slip lead. Can you teach the dog to be off the end of the lead and also have that release cue to let it know when it can come and go? The amount of frustration you can remove from a dog's life so quickly that way is outrageous.
Just for me, that clarity, this predictability, and the dog understanding this means that, this means this. And absolutely, in terms of everything you said there about, for me, I always say where the scarcity, well, it depends actually, in terms of when you create, scarcity, where there's scarcity, there's value, in the sense that if something is, just basically agreeing with what you're saying.
But people are so like, and it's hard, and I understand it, I get where they're coming from. You've got to stop letting it off the lead, so you've got to go through more of the thing that's making life shit.
Yeah.
But not get to see your dog run around and enjoy itself, because the moments where it's enjoying itself, and like you say, it might be daycare as well, the moments where it's enjoying itself, it's not being balanced with understanding that this is a privilege that I've earned. Like, so a release cue would be massive on that.
Oh, yeah.
Like, can that dog sit politely and wait until it's given permission to go do whatever it wants to do? Game changer.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, I go to people and say, right, do you have a release cue? And they obviously look at me like what's that? And I always ask people, if you told your dog to wait for its food, what would you say to tell it could go? And they're like, okay, go, whatever. That's your release cue. Now start using it in other settings, and you get to unlock that pre-Mac principle of I can give you access to something good as a result of doing something good. And for me, I think that'd be...
They're the biggest reinforcers as well, a lot of the time. Yeah, environment, dogs, people.
The dog doesn't want food from me. What do I do? What does it want?
Yeah, exactly.
Teach it a behaviour. Ask it for the behaviour so that it can have the thing it really wants when appropriate.
Yeah, it's 100%.
Boxed off.
That's why that on and off system when you're walking down the street is so important, because you can give the dog the full length of the lead, which ultimately is what the dog wants half the time.
Yeah, anyway. Absolutely. Cool. Right, so we've got quite a lot of sort of stuff in there, and a lot of stuff about the industry, a lot of like advice for some people there, and hopefully a way of framing things for people that they may not have thought about before. So in terms of like what you do, so obviously I'm very grateful for you for coming on with us. What is there anything that you're working on at the minute that you want people to know about? Is there anything that you're particularly passionate about that you'd like to kind of steal all my customers for?
Super thankful that I'm super busy, which is mint. The big thing at the minute is the reactivity classes, to be honest with you. That is something that it's something that I'm trying to offer and trying to offer more, and I don't know how it's going to necessarily work yet. There may be...
So this is like a group class?
A group class that I do 2 or 3 every single week. And it's not a class in the setting as in we go to a church hall or whatever. It's very much a live class in the sense of we take a maximum of 4 dogs. It's just me. Just because ultimately logistics, safety, crucial. But where we do it, it sounds very strange, but we do it in an industrial estate, which is dead. It's quiet. Nobody there at all. So it allows me to have a nice solid environment, but we're literally like 10 minutes walk from busy areas, town centres. So it's great for exposure. Long story short, I've had all sorts of different dogs in there. We swap the groups around a little bit. We build it. But basically, we've took dogs who have literally like lots of overseas rescues who are like petrified of everything to the point where now it's like, don't actually need you to come now, because it's just, well, they do, because it's just like a fun experience. The dogs get on, they have a sniff, and we're sat now having a brew in town centre and stuff. So awesome. That for me is something I'm really passionate about. Similar to yourself, like I obviously do. Do
you require the people to have been
100%? Taught? It's not just to turn up. It's a case of I always say, unfortunately, before you come, you've got to have a consultation, because I need to make sure what your skill set's like, what your attitude to training is like, and also I'm very protective of that environment because the biggest thing for me, I do obviously the one-to-ones. I do quite a bit of coaching as well online, because that's a good way of supporting people, but the key thing is, like, you know yourself, reactivity, it's the continuity that people miss. You know, like when you've done what you do and then you leave them to it, you're reliant on them doing it. But also, to be fair to the owners, it's like you're dealing with the mercy of the public. So for me, it's trying to bring in some continuity and a bit of a community where people can go, yeah, I know how you feel. Yeah, you're doing mint. And do you know what I mean? It's trying to, and also,
I love that.
And also as well, like, not to virtue signal or like, but because of the world that we live in, I try and keep it economical for people rather than come into a class where I can split the cost right down and people can get more from it. Do you know what I mean? I just think, and the more people that can do that, reactivity type clubs in that way, I just think so people get so much more out of it.
It's something I've done with, again, industrial estate. Like, it was in the car park, we could shut the gate, or one of the dogs could just sod off down the street if it needed a breather. I think it's just very weather dependent in a lot of cases and stuff. So,
like last weekend, we were a bit knackered, but
so like it's totally took a back burner with us, but that's awesome. I like the sound of that.
Definitely, I think for me as well, it's getting the dog in live situations so that you don't get a bit of a false positive that you might get sometimes if you are in a super controlled environment. Whereas, like I say, we have the ability to walk down and up into town, and if it's too much, we can notice that and we can give the dog a breather. But then thinking, okay, next week let's maybe take this pressure off, or maybe let's put a bit of pressure on and see how the dog copes.
Yeah, being
just
able
so
to
that people can go away and think, I can do that without him. Yeah, and they have the confidence.
I mean, that's got to be the goal, hasn't it?
I just referee.
They don't need me.
Exactly. I always say.
I think I know Lewis has said that before. So Lewis from Manchester Canine, who was on the last episode, I think I've seen it on his before. My goal has got to be that they don't need me anymore.
Yeah, I say that to people. I don't want to work with you for very long.
Yeah, and there's some people that I work with, and I've been working with them forever, but they just enjoy learning more stuff. I'll keep working with you.
Yeah.
But I don't want to have to.
Yeah.
Like, and there's some people I'm like, God, if I never see you again, well, I've done my job well.
Yeah.
But then there's other people where I've done it and they're happy, but we kind of still carry on because they either want to keep on top of it or they just want to keep, they just enjoy the process. Cool. So where can people find you?
People can find me, to be honest, I'm a bit of a dinosaur. So Instagram. I don't do Facebook, don't really do TikTok. Can't be arsed with it if I'm being brutally honest.
Same.
So yeah, Instagram, the Mutt Nut, that's the place for me. Obviously I have a website as well, but the best place is Instagram. Yeah, it's one of those things. Love what you're doing with YouTube and stuff. I just maybe forget the time one day, but I think there's that many good people out there doing it. I feel like
I feel like it's something that I've wanted to do for so long, and like so I was telling you beforehand, like I wanted to go on a podcast. I kept seeing them thinking that looks fun, but then there was none, so I thought, sorry, I'll just do one. But yeah, like I want to do more of the YouTube stuff myself, but it's just getting
it looks good, mate.
Putting the time together to actually make the stuff, because I think you can give more value that way than over a 90-second reel. But yeah, cool. So, well, again, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. Really interesting episode. I love these chats. Love kind of picking people's brains and hearing. Sometimes just finding out that I'm not my own. Because it's such a lonely job sometimes where you just kind of, it's good to know there's people out there doing similar but kind of different things. Exactly, and that's awesome.
No, thank you so much for having me on, mate.
Awesome. Love it. Well, cheers.
Cheers, mate.
Cool. Thanks, guys. We'll see you in the next one. Cheers.